Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on reviews, retention, and revenue. I'm so delighted that so many of you have registered for this. We've got over 100 people. So it's really, really an important meeting, this. It's the driver of client satisfaction. It's really the engine room of referrals often, and it drives many of your processes. And so when you get this right, you make more money, you can help more people, and essentially you enjoy your job more. You're having more interesting conversations. And my interest in this subject began about 5 years ago when I kept hearing from firms that they were struggling to get their clients to come to these meetings. And it made me question, like, what's going on? Like, why would somebody not want to come to this meeting to find out that they've got enough, to check that they're on track? Like, what was going on? And so I've spent a good chunk of time researching this topic. And I've spoken at the PFS conference on this topic and the CISI one recently. And what I've noticed is that firms approach this meeting in lots and lots of different ways. And so before we get going, what I'd love to know from you is, how would you describe your process currently? Are you nailing it? Are clients coming, like biting your hand off to come? They're chasing you for the meeting? Would you say they're solid but could be better? Maybe they're currently a bit of a tick box exercise, or you fully recognize that you're ready for a revamp. You can answer this anonymously if you prefer. It just gives me a sense of where people are. Lots of twos. Twos, okay, lots of twos. Brilliant. Great. Okay, two is the one. Okay, so what I'd love to know from you next is, what do you think would make the biggest difference? Would it be better client-facing documents, so they're more engaged? Would it be helping you to demonstrate the value more clearly in the meetings? Would it be more structured and engaging conversations? Or would it be improved efficiency? Number two, lots of twos, one and two, client-facing documents. Okay, two and three. Good. Okay, two and three. Great. And three and four. Okay. Super. Thank you. That's really helpful for me to know. So if we've not met before, hello, my name is Melissa, and I specialize in helping those in the finance sector to communicate more effectively. Advisors and planners typically come to me because they want help either making more money, helping more people, or feeling more confident in front of clients. I regularly speak at conferences on this topic. And my background was psychology. I'm very, very interested in the language that we can use to help drive behavior and decisions. I don't want to talk too much about me, though. So if you'd like to learn more, that's my LinkedIn profile. Do come and connect with me if we're not there already. So in terms of what I'd like to cover today, I want to share 3 ground rules that can really help ensure that your communication is effective. These are ground rules that you can use before meetings, during meetings, after meetings. They're effective when you're talking to women, children, all sorts of people. I'll then show you why some pre-meeting communications don't work. This was part of my research when I was looking at, why aren't people coming to these meetings? The pre-meeting comms have a big role to play in that, I believe. And then lastly, I'll finish off by sharing some 5 common mistakes that I see fairly regularly and really are impacting how engaging this meeting is, therefore how often clients want to come, and therefore how many referrals you're able to generate. In terms of what to expect, I am recording this, so I'll send the recording to those who have registered. I want to make it practical, so you'll be able to use things straight away, and thought-provoking, so maybe you can ponder some ideas that I'm going to share. I'll present for about 30-ish minutes, and then I'll take questions at the end. Do use the chat as you're doing already. And I've put together a pack, which is really a sort of collection of scripts and templates and ideas that you can access at the end. So why should we be focusing on this topic at all? Excuse me. Well, as you well know, when you look at the average lifetime value of a client, once you have a client on board, they tend to stick with you for quite a long time. Generally, you're doing a good job demonstrating value. They often don't want to move somewhere else unless something, goes pretty wrong, or they don't feel like they are getting enough face time with you. So the good news is that churn is pretty low, and these figures, of course, are quite conservative because they're not incorporating any of the referrals that are probably coming your way for existing clients. So that's the good news. The bad news, however, is that when we're looking at some of these long-term trends, women are less likely to stick with their partner's advisor on their death. So you may have seen some of this research coming out of Vanguard. And not only that, when we look at the children who are going to inherit this wealth, actually 87% of children are going to consider a different advisor. So we need to see what we can do to change this meeting, to change the communication so that these women and these children do want to maintain a relationship with us. So let's look at these 3 ground rules for effective communication. And before we do that, I just want to start with some general context and some principles. Many of you may have heard me say this before, but effective communication isn't actually about what you say or write. It's about what people do afterwards. So if we're writing a letter, inviting someone to their review or their planning meeting, as I like to call them, and they don't come, that letter hasn't worked. If you don't use one thing after this webinar, then my communication hasn't worked. So what we're looking to do is create some action as a result of the communication. Now, in order for someone to take some action, they first got to pay attention to what we're saying. And as you will know, we are now in the attention economy. There are so many things coming at us, so many decisions to make, so much information coming at us, that people's attention is at a premium. In fact, Johann Hari's book called Stolen Focus references some research that says that we can now only pay attention on average for about 3 minutes. So we cannot take for granted if someone's giving us their attention ahead of the meeting, during the meeting, just because they're sitting in front of us and we're talking about their financial future, their attention isn't a given. We've got to make sure that it's engaging. And Herbert Simon, who's a Nobel laureate, also said, a wealth of information, all this information is creating a poverty of attention. So what can we do about this? Well, given that attention is currency now, we need to think about how do we harness it, how do we grab it, and how do we maintain it? Of course, we've also got to cater for people's not only shortening attention and fracturing attention spans, but especially those of people who are in vulnerable circumstances. When we're feeling a lot of emotion, the ability for us to process information is also shortened. So we've got to think very carefully about how we are communicating. So how do we do this? Well, there's a very simple truth, and you will recognize it yourself, that we tend to pay attention to things that we care about. It's not hard for us to pay attention to things that matter to us. And we all care about 3 things. We care about problems that we want to solve. So this is probably why at the beginning of a relationship with a client, when they've got lots of problems that you can fix, that you can solve, you have no problem getting your client to that meeting. But as you fix those problems and they move into what Megan Lertz calls the fine stage, sometimes it can then be difficult to get them along because the problems aren't there. They've been solved. And this is where we then need to change how we communicate with them. The second thing that we all pay attention to really readily is results. We tend to care more about results than process. So at these meetings, clients want to know that they're going to be okay, that they're on track. They're less interested in the various processes that they have followed or their money has gone down in order to arrive at that result. So we care more about results. Results is what grabs our attention more readily than processes. And lastly, we care more about the future than the past. The future is more relevant to us. It's more interesting. It's more evocative. Whereas the past is, yeah, it's behind us. It's already happened. And so one of my big uh, sort of requests of firms is to consider changing the name of the review to a planning meeting or a progress meeting or a strategy meeting. Those names infer that we're going to be talking about the future, not just reviewing what's gone behind us, what's already happened. So, in essence, we care about three things. We care about problems we want to solve, we care about results, not process, and we care more about the future than the past in order to gain attention. So, with that in mind, let's now look at why some pre-meeting communications don't work very well. So, I've seen quite a lot of review letters, inviting clients to reviews, and have a read of that and let me know whether you would want to go to that meeting. Nope. No. Lots of no's, lots of no's, lots of no's. Okay. What about what about the reason is partly, I'm going to just pull it apart a little bit so that you can see what we can do differently. We want to make sure that the client is front and center. So when we're talking about me a lot and I a lot, actually what we want to do is flip that and use a lot of you and yours. In this letter, they've said, my commitment to you as a valued client. So what we want to be doing is showing them that they are a valued client, not telling them they're a valued client. And the way that we might do that is to incorporate some of the objectives that they care about, some of the life stuff that they are excited about. So to confirm that your investment objectives and life goals, again, it's very generic. I need to know if your circumstances have changed. So there are some little tweaks that we can make that really don't take very long, but can make a massive difference in terms of the engagement that you'll get. So here's another one. To ensure your objectives are up to date and your financial plans remain suitable, I strongly recommend that we conduct a formal annual review. This service is a core part of the ongoing advice I provide and for which you continue to pay an ongoing advice charge. How about that? Would that entice you to come along? More likely? No. Yes, Julie, I will share the recording. Still a bit dry. Yeah, exactly. So where's the door? Absolutely. So I think the tone here is I'm not sure about you, but when I read that, I sort of feel a little bit like I'm being told off. So I think we want to change the tone to make it feel conversational. Now, especially if we're going to be thinking about how to engage children and women, let's make this a bit more conversational. So the other thing that I'm helping firms do is particularly those firms that are at capacity and are wanting to move some of their client bank to more junior advisors. And how do they move that relationship on? One of the things I'm encouraging them to do is for the younger advisors to call ahead of this annual planning meeting and say, is there anything that you would like to discuss during the meeting? But what often happens when people make these calls is that they simply just say, it's time for your review, that time of year again. We offer you a financial review at least once a year as it's a regulatory requirement for us. Or it's a regulatory requirement that we meet to discuss your financial review each year. So there's quite a lot we could do if you're making those calls to make them sound really interesting, engaging, and that the client's questions and priorities are going to take priority. So how it could sound, let's look at what we could do differently. This is what I would suggest saying instead. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon and discussing your financial future. So here, future focused. Last time we spoke, you mentioned you'd like to retire at 65 or whatever it is that they said that they wanted to do in their life, the thing that they care about. Now, a lot can happen in a year and a lot has happened. Now, it's up to you what you want to incorporate here. You might want to mention the budget. You might want to mention any changes in legislation that will impact them. You might want to talk about the markets, although sometimes, that can be not a good idea, depending on how educated they are and how good a job you've done in terms of getting them to not look at the markets. But the point of that is to show that things have changed. So even if they say, nothing's changed at our end, you can say that things have changed in the financial landscape, which are going to affect you. You're making it relevant. So it's important that we meet to ensure you're still on track to stop work and still live comfortably. So what you're doing here is you're pressing those psychological buttons of we're going to do something that we want to do, and we're going to avoid something that you don't want to do. And hopefully you can see that sounds really conversational and it's relevant to what this person cares about. So you can see that small differences actually can make quite significant changes. And I think it's important to realize that often people will say, we can't bespoke every letter. It would take too long. And I'm not suggesting that you do that. What I am suggesting is that you just take the little bits from the file that you'll need to get out anyway ahead of the review and just start to pull bits from it that are going to make it more enticing. When Vanguard released their Client Connect study last October, this is one of the things that came across loudly, is that the most valued element of advice from an investor point of view, from a client point of view, was the personalization. So to what degree you personalize that, of course, will depend on your service offering and segmentation and so on. But if you're struggling to get clients to the reviews, this letter, or just changing your letter so that you're making it more engaging and more relevant and more personal, has shown to really seen an uptake in reviews. So Rachel was a perfect example of someone whose practice really felt like they just didn't know which way to go. They're a bit stuck. They knew they had to get lots of compliance stuff in there, but they didn't know how to sort of meld the compliance requirements with making something that was engaging to read. And I was able to share some tips, as I've done here, give them some letters, and now they're getting much better feedback. So if you want some help with your letters, or just a chat about how you can make your meeting a bit more engaging, I've made 5 slots available in my calendar this week for any of you who've joined live, who would like to just pick my brains. I'm happy to audit some of your letters. Often it can just be, someone, an external eye that could just quickly make some suggestions and help you get on your way. So the other thing to remember is that it's not just the pre-meeting letter that needs attention, it's also the post-meeting communication, because especially if they've got some actions to do, we need to keep up that momentum. And this is a subject line that was sent to me. And I have to ask you, if you are a busy person, which I'm sure you are, with lots of demands on your time, remembering that, we're in the attention economy, would you open that email with that subject line? Absolutely not. It does look like spam, doesn't it? Those numbers meant absolutely nothing to me. And again, meeting summary, it's about the past. We want to be making things future focused to make them relevant. So give some thought to your subject lines. They're very, very important real estate in terms of gaining attention. And often we will give a lot of attention to the body of the email, and the subject line comes last. It's just sort of a last thought. And yet when you think about how you open emails, you'll scan your inbox, you'll see who it's come from, and then you'll look at the subject line. And if both of those things are exciting, you'll open the email. But if you're very busy and you maybe like the person, but it looks a really boring email, you won't open it. And then you see that's going to start having to require a lot of chasing, and it's eating away at your profit margins and your enjoyment. No one likes chasing people. So let me just check the time. Let's now move on to the common review mistakes, which really are impacting referral potential, retention, and revenue. So the first, and I've alluded it already, is focusing predominantly on the past. So the name annual review indicates that we are just looking back and it only happens once a year. And again, in that Vanguard study, I'm sure many of you have read it. One of the things that also came out was that clients do want to be talking to you more regularly than once a year. So how can we just make sure that those touch points are fairly frequent? Not only that, Vouch For's research showed that if you speak to clients about 4 times a year, your referral opportunity skyrockets, essentially. Second is that the process feels a bit stale and repetitive. This can be because, the agenda is the same, you're asking the same questions, you've been doing it for a long time, you know the families, and it can just feel quite monotonous. And if you feel that, then the clients are probably going to feel that as well. So what can we do to change that process a little bit? Third, which is of course what we've been talking about now, is sending letters and emails but not getting much response, and hopefully you've got an idea about why that is now. Fourth is this belief that communication, which is both compliant and engaging, isn't we can't do it. So it's an impossibility to do both, and that that's often a mindset. It's often a mindset and a skill set. And then the fifth is prioritizing information over impact. So this is, sharing a lot of information, but not really translating in terms of what that means for the client, why that's valuable. And when we struggle to demonstrate our value, that's when we can feel a bit uneasy around fees. Because if we're not quite sure what the difference is that we're making, then when we come to the fee conversation, it becomes a bit clunky. So what out of those would you say you recognize, if any? Feels a bit stale. Five impact, yeah. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 2 and 3. All of them. Okay. Okay, we've got quite a few. Okay, good range. Okay, well, I'm just going to run through some quick pointers on what you can do to address these, and then I'll share the information about my pack, and then we can have some questions. So, as I've mentioned already, if you're calling it a review meeting, an annual review meeting, I would suggest that you change its name and you call it a progress or a planning or a strategy meeting. You can probably hear how different they sound. And what I've seen with some of the clients that I work with is that just changing the name has seen a better engagement. It also then means, you see, that you can have part of the agenda looking at investment performance, but then a big chunk of it is what's coming down the track, life transitions. There's lots more scope that you can have if you're not just calling it a review meeting. The second is if your process feels a bit stale and repetitive. So many of you may be familiar with Megan Lert. She's a communication expert, among many other things, over in the States. And she's put together a sort of a body of work on why people in the States don't want to go to their meetings. And she talked about how clients move through this journey of fix, fine, flourish. And essentially, when you start working with someone, you're fixing all of their problems. Once you've done that, they then move into the fine category. And when they're in this sort of stage, this is often where people go, nah, nothing's changed at our end, everything's fine, I just trust you. And it can be quite difficult to engage them in the meeting at that point. And what she recommends you do is then start talking about, okay, well, how can we use your finances to help you flourish? And this is where you're often changing the questions in the meeting, because it might have taken you 5 or so years to fix all of those problems. Now, you probably weren't the same person 5 years ago as you are then, and neither are your clients. So sometimes she will call this meeting at this stage a rediscovery meeting. So it's about making sure that you're getting to know them at that stage of life, not just about not just about their financial picture and so on, but them as people. If you don't call ahead before your meeting, that can be a good way of engaging and injecting some energy and some enthusiasm into the process. Asking questions, as I mentioned, that often we can get a bit formulaic with our questions, and I've got a list of questions that you can ask, which really can help, hopefully, stimulate some interesting conversations. So the third is sending letters and emails, but not getting much response. So hopefully you can now see you actually can strike a better balance between the templated emails, which I know, and letters, which I know need to be sent because of efficiency purposes. But let's see if we can just inject some personalization there to make it more relevant for the reader. The fourth is, believing that both compliant and engaging communication can't happen. It definitely can. And I do a lot of work with cats, and what we're doing is we're not necessarily changing the facts of what's being said. We're just making it more engaging, more readable, more easily understood. And of course, with consumer duty, that's really important these days. We've got to make sure that they actually understand what we're saying. And then the fifth point really is about, how do you communicate your value other than showing them that they're going to be okay, hopefully, and cash flow forecasts can do that really nicely. Maybe you quantify some of the cash wins that you've been able to save, and maybe you're using this meeting to teach them some points around things like inflation creep or risk and reward, or various strategies that you can show them that maybe no one's ever explained them to them before. But so you're using this meeting also as teaching them some concepts too. And I think very few advisors do that. They're not up at the whiteboard showing them some things. We're often just sharing some information. But what is really, really important is relaying what the information is that you're sharing with how it matters, why it's relevant for them, what it means for them. And I think these review meetings can be a really good opportunity to teach some concepts as well as show them what you've done for them lately, and share that they're going to be okay. And if they're not going to be okay, what the plan is to put them back on the right track. So if you want some help with a lot of these scripts and sample letters and questions, then I put this pack together. It really is in a box, ready for you to have more engaging in meetings. I'll just run through what you'll get in it. Ready to go email subject line. So if you're struggling to know what to put in that subject line, I've written some for you. A checklist before you send your letters and before you have the meeting, so that they know that it's personalized. Those calls, if you're running those calls, I've got some scripts for you. Pre-meeting letters, again, I've shown you a couple of paragraphs, but there's more to go at, especially if you're a bit further down the process and they've not responded already. Like, what do you say at that point? That's this letter. A client-focused agenda. I often look at agendas and I do think sometimes they're a bit dry. So I've put together one that really is compliant, but also engaging, and put together 35 questions that you can use in conjunction with this agenda, so that it does sound conversational and isn't just tick box. Again, how you demonstrate your value. And I think sometimes we're not very good at talking to clients, when the markets are moving and they're panicking. We can tend to just problem solve. So how we have that conversation is really important. And also how we talk to clients about sustainable investing. I think, this is an element of compliance. We need to be talking to clients about ESG and sustainability. And often there is a lack of confidence around how to do that. And so I've included some information about how you might have that conversation. Plus a 30-minute tutorial from me, bring it all together. And if you download the pack, I don't know about you, but many people will download this sort of information and then put it to one side and not use it. You will get a 30-minute call with me just to help you implement it. So it's not just something that you implement and so you put to the side. You're actually gonna use it and have a call with me. So yeah, lots of people are finding it useful. if you'd like to download it, you can scan that QR code. And yeah, we are now at 30 minutes. So I'll just run through the key learning objectives, and then we'll have some time for questions. So remember those 3 ground rules for effective communication. Attention is crucial, and we care about 3 things. So that when we care about these things, we're more likely to pay attention to them. So problems we want to solve, results not process, future not the past. Recognizing why some pre-meeting communications don't work, often it's just because they're too generic, they're not personalized enough. So you can hopefully include a few personal details and see your engagement go up. And then those 5 common mistakes are focusing too heavily on the past, the process feels a bit stale, it's a bit repetitive, sending letters and emails but not getting much response and having to do lots of chasing, believing that communication that is compliant and engaging can't be done, definitely can, and prioritizing information over impact to make sure that we're bringing this alive and making it meaningful for our clients. So there's the code if you want the pack again. But yeah, let's have some time for questions now. Sarah, I found that being able to link my laptop to a big screen, bring up information, links. Yeah, I think this is the thing, Sarah, is that, what we're often doing is selling the invisible. And the more that we can make things visible, both in a first meeting when people are, maybe they've never had advice before and it all seems a bit ambiguous, what we can do and show them with visuals, with illustrations, with sketches, all of that stuff. Many people are visual learners, and it really helps to cement the ideas and concepts in their minds. So it's something that I teach, because often we're not really taught how to get up to the whiteboard and visualize things. I think the only thing I would say about getting a cash flow up is we can get very excited as advisors about all the things that they can do. So, show them, spend a little bit of time on it, but don't spend too long with the screen. We want to spend the majority of the time asking them questions, getting to know them as well as possible. Does anyone have any questions? I know that these meetings can take, up to 6 hours preparation for some firms. I think that, there's tweaks that can be done to the efficiency, but that's for another day. Well, how long do you think a meeting should be? I think, well, I guess it depends on how many you're having. I would say an hour and a half tops, depending on how complex things are. Yeah, I think when you're going into sort of 3-hour meetings, I think that can really be a drain on someone's attention. What have you found to be the best initial way to contact for a review meeting, phone, email? Well, I'm a big fan of the phone call and trying to get as much data as possible so that you've got the updated cash flows and income and expenditure, so that you can then work with live data. So it will depend. Generally, people seem to enjoy the phone call because it's another human touch point. But of course, not everyone wants to do that. So, emails, letters, it will very, very much depend on your client. But I think if you've got an engaging subject line, you're more likely to get that email opened. Have you been able to ascertain how effective these changes in methods and communications have been? I think one of my clients has set themselves a goal of that they'll know that they're acing their review meeting when the clients are calling them for it. So it's not about chasing them, and so we're on the way for that. These things, do take quite a long time to integrate, because often we're only having one meeting a year. Generally, of course, the higher service clients, they are getting more. So yeah, I think if you can set that as a benchmark, that your clients are calling you for your review, because the meeting is so useful, it's so valuable, that they don't want to make decisions without you there. That's a real benchmark of you're really adding a lot of value to their life, and they really value you in having you in their corner. Do you think the annual review concept is outdated compared to the regular? Yeah. Well, I think, Ben, that there will always be a place to review portfolio performance and show them what's been happening. But I think more and more people are going to want to know what's coming down the line, and plan for it. And we think about financial planning. That's really what's really what we're doing. So I think there will always be and necessary to hold us accountable to what we have been doing. But I think it needs to be a short part, and then make sure that you're adding lots of value and being relevant as possible by focusing on the future transition, what's coming down the line. Okay, well, I think that's all for the questions. Oh, hang on. What's a good way of asking clients whether the planning meeting was useful to them, ensuring you get honest feedback? Yeah, it's a really good question, Sue. I think one of the questions that I've included in the pack towards the end of the meeting is to ask, we've talked about a lot of things today. What stood out for you? So it's a really conversational way of being able to get them to reflect, and hopefully that will then give you an insight into how clear your communication has been. Have they actually taken on board what was really important that they needed to understand in this meeting? And if that's also then an opportunity for them to say, listen, I get that that's important. I just don't fully understand this carry forward concept you talked about. So it's an opportunity again for them to ask a question or clear something up if they didn't really follow what we were saying. So I think that is a good sort of conversational way, without sort of feeling like they're being tested. Do you, I think there can be this notion now that Consumer Duty is wanting to demonstrate understanding, that, that can be quite a difficult thing to do conversationally. But I like that question. And it's something that I often ask in coaching sessions, what stood out for you? And you're getting to know your clients a bit better, deeper in what they say and what they reflect back. Sabrina, could you, alongside the recording, forward any articles that you have found useful around this topic? Some weekend reading, perhaps? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's some great podcasts on this topic. I mean, I'll just mention a few now. So there's the PFS Power platform. There's a lot of information on there. Brett Davis has done some stuff. I've done some things. There's The Human Side of Money, a podcast. There is a couple that jump out immediately. Oh, I think the other thing I should say is Cats are doing a coffee lounge on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Where someone from the Landcat is talking about the FCA review on reviews. So that will be a current update on what the FCA is thinking about reviews. So try and sign up for that. That's compliance and training. Cats, many of you will know Mel Holman. Okay, well, we're almost at time, but if you have got any questions, that's my email on the screen. And yeah, do look out for the recording if you want to watch it again. All right, thanks very much.